Welcome back to our Elul liturgy reflections. Throughout the month of Elul, 3 times a week, I share a piece of liturgy that was written by one of our members in 2020 and 2021, as our High Holy Day services needed to be online only, and we wanted our members to connect in different ways, and so we encouraged our members to write liturgy and to contribute to our services, because if they could not lift up their voice in public, they could at least share their liturgy. Our piece today comes from Keppel, and it's called Yearning for Solace. And I'm actually, where previously I had shared the piece and then the commentary, I'm going to share the commentary first. And the reason that I do that is because piyutim, liturgical poems, which feature very heavily in the traditional Siddur, are often based on a piece of liturgy or on a text like a psalm. And so Bo has very specifically taken a psalm, Psalm 131, and written her piece based on that. And so I think it's important to hear the excerpt from Psalm 131 before hearing Bo's piece. Yearning for Solace, a poem for Rosh Hashanah 2021. By the second Rosh Hashanah of the pandemic, Bo writes, I felt unhinged, floating, or perhaps hovering, somewhere and searching for something to ground me. I turned to the Psalms, where I hoped to find, perhaps erroneously, one that began, I lift up my eyes to the hills whence cometh my strength, at Psalm 121. This quote was written just below the steeple of the White Chapel sitting atop a hill on Middlebury College campus, where I completed my undergraduate work. In 1959, when I entered, and continuing through graduation 4 years later, chapel, Christian of course, was mandatory for all students, no matter their religious affiliation. I overcame my reluctance to attend by trying out and being selected for choir, where I could lose myself in music, performed out loud or to myself during prayers and sermons. Reading the words as I climbed the hill to choir rehearsals and Sunday morning services each week, I came to love the quote, feeling that indeed there was a spiritual essence about the mountains surrounding me, and I felt nurtured and protected in them. New Mexico's mountains are not green, nor gently rising like those of Vermont, but rather abrupt and sheer, demonstrating more power than comfort. However, there is something spiritual about them, similar to that of the Green Mountains of Vermont. I didn't find the psalm I was seeing, but found instead Psalm 131, which reads, O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor my look haughty. I do not aspire to great things or to what is beyond me. But I have taught myself to be contented, like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am in my mind. O Israel, wait for the Lord, now and forever. And Bo says this struck me very powerfully. The first 2 stanzas of my poem outline what we had been through, fear, then hope, then hopes dashed, then confusion and the search for understanding. This is because we deliberately didn't have High Holy Day services in person in 2020. In 2021, the hope had definitely been for us to be gathered together, and then as COVID really exploded again in the summer, our hopes were dashed and we realized we had to be online again. The third stanza, we do not ask for what is beyond us, but only ask for help in accepting the uncertainty as a means to release us from fear. David says he is like a weaned child with its mother, but I prefer that instead we had become like children again in need of our mother's close, of her hand in ours. We needed her, God, our mother, to reassure us that the life we knew would return. The next stanza sends us to the hills in search of God, and perhaps we might find solace there, but only if we are patient enough to listen and hear, to look and see. However, the final stanza sends us to each other to give and find comfort in the new year, not through touch, but through words, smiles, and songs. In rereading both Psalm 131 and the poem many times to write this, Bo says, I realize what I hadn't before, that the poem has moved distinctly away from, I lift up my eyes to the hills whence cometh my strength. It ends with our not waiting for God, like David to give us strength, but rather reaching out to each other in community to lift us up, to reassure us and give us strength to live with the uncertainty. Interesting. And so here is the piece, Yearning for Solace, by Keppel for Rosh Hashanah 2021. from David's Songs of Ascents. The darkness came, we were afraid. Guidance was proffered, some complied. Morning came, we hoped. Darkness returned, we wept. Again we wait, we don our masks. We hide our fear, but cry within. Our brains delve deep for certainty. Our bodies yearn for touch. We do not ask for what is beyond us, but only for the will to accept not knowing what, or when, or how. Our hearts may find peace in such uncertainty. Like a child whose hand is clasped by her mother, we yearn for God to hold our own tightly enough to wait for her promised words of assurance, this too shall pass. We search these hills for beauty, counsel, and healing. There we find wonder, awe, and thanksgiving. We may also find light and the assurance we seek if we let ourselves listen, hear, look, and then see. Again it's a new year, and still we dare not touch, but offer comfort with words to those we cannot hug. Send love with our smiles, raise hope with our songs, and pray that this new year brings solace to all. It's another extraordinary piece of liturgy. This one is very deliberately in the style of a piyut, of a liturgical poem. As with one of the earlier readings that I shared at the beginning of Elul, it's very interesting to look at the pronouns used for God and what they mean, what the effect is. Looking in Psalm 131, when David talks about, I have taught myself to be contented like a weaned child with its mother. Bo has taken that and extended the metaphor to God as mother. And during the High Holy Days, the liturgy uses very masculine dominant terms, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. In the liberal community in the UK, they included in their liturgy a feminine version of that. It doesn't ring the same way. Bo, very unapologetically and quite rightly, talks about God as mother. Like a child whose hand is clasped by her mother, we yearn for God to hold our own tightly enough to wait for her promised words of assurance, this too shall pass. And what Bo has done here is deliberately inverted Psalm 131, and I think it's quite a brilliant critique almost of that psalm. Because that psalm says, we, like babes, are content like a babe with a mother. We cry, we need sustenance, the mother provides, and that's done. But Bo shares a theology of unsettlement, a theology of not being there yet, of yearning for that hand to be clasped, yearning for God to say, this too shall pass. I think it's a really powerful theological statement, not just God as mother, but God as mother who still has yet to provide the comfort that is needed. And I really feel that. I remember that feeling very strongly from 2021, that feeling of disappointment and that feeling of, where is God in this? And Bo seems to answer that in her way, in patience, and that God's reassurance is coming. And that is really the message of Elul, that message of reassurance, that message that if we reach out to God, God reaches out to us, that God seeks right relationship. Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote the book, God in Search of Man, that just as we search for God, God searches for us. And I think there's something very powerful for me, especially about the ending, how we move from that darkness. The little critique, I have to say, guidance was preferred, some complied. That was actually a really bold statement of difficulty, of we could have got through the pandemic quicker had everyone complied, had everyone taken care of everyone else. I think there's a gentle, subtle social critique there. Morning came, we hoped. Darkness returned, we wept. And so again, it's a feeling of going back. But this going back here is a negative going back, to don our masks, to cry within. But Elul is about going back to Shuvah, returning to right relationship, returning to God and us together. And so it's very powerful that Bo ends. It's a new year we still dare not touch, but offer comfort with words to those we cannot hug. We send love with our smiles, raise hope with our songs, and pray that this new year brings solace to all. I think that's still an absolutely appropriate statement. We can still send love with our smiles, even those who we can now hug. We can still send love with our smiles. We can raise hope with our songs. And we can all pray that this new year brings solace to us all. The blessing before the shofar, lishmoa kol shofar, thanks God, who commands us to hear the voice, the sound of the shofar. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. I wish you Shabbat Shalom, and we will return with our Elul reflections next week.